welcome to the Moviescramble podcast. There are some stories that don't unfold, they spill. They crash into each other like weather fronts gathering momentum until the sky itself decides it's had enough. Today, we are stepping into the San Fernando Valley, where chance feels like destiny, pain echoes across generations, and the universe occasionally throws frogs at you, just to remind you that you're not in control. This is Magnolia, Paul Thomas Anderson's sprawling, feverish mosaic of regret, forgiveness, and the strange ways people try to outrun themselves. So settle in, keep an eye on the weather forecast, and remember, we may be through with the past, but the past is not through with us. So if you haven't guessed from the minor speech that I gave you there, today we are talking about Paul Thomas Anderson's magnum opus, Magnolia, from 1999.
There are stories of coincidence and chance and intersections and strange things told, and which is which and who only knows. And we generally say, well, if that was in a movie, I wouldn't believe it.
I'm Stanley Spector.
I'm Frank T.J. Mackey.
I'm Jimmy Gator.
I'm Phil Parma.
I'm Dixon.
I'm Quiska Dunny Smith.
I'm Linda Partridge.
I'm Earl Partridge.
I'm Officer Jim Curring.
I'm Claudia Wilson Gator.
These strange things happen all the time.
The cast of this film is extensive. So in the sort of main lead roles, we have Tom Cruise, Jason Robards, Julianne Moore, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Meloria Walters, Philip Baker Hall, Melinda Dillon, John C. Reilly, and William H. Macy, and a supporting cast that is probably about 3 times as long as that as well. This is one of our collaboration podcasts where we talk to writers, podcasters, people who have just got a passion for cinema. We ask people along to talk about the film that ignited their love for all things cinema and movies. And today we are joined by Emily Lawler. Hello, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
I suppose I might as well mention Mary as well because she's here.
Hi,
Mary, how are you doing?
I'm not Tom Cruise here. I'm very much supporting cast in this particular episode. And I'm good with that because I'm really glad that we're getting to chat about this. And I've watched lots of Emily's film reviews that she has done with Jim, Scottish Geek Guy. So I feel like we're in safe hands here.
So let's just get into it. Emily, when was the first time that you saw Magnolia?
I watched Magnolia on VHS in my lounge room, age 17. So the year 2000. I was like drama school at the time. So I am not an actress these days, but when I was 17, I was like working in that direction. And I went on to kind of drama school after high school and stuff like that. So, but I think I found this film through Amy Mann's CD. I don't think that I had heard about it from a acting perspective. I think that I was in HMV and I randomly bought number 10 or whatever the CD is called, and then found out about the film through the CD. And I was really familiar with all of the songs in the soundtrack before I watched the film. And I think that the two things cannot exist without one another. And I think that's a really, I can't off the top of my head think of another movie that has just one songwriter and that is sort of narrating the film for you from a sound like track perspective. Yeah, it was a very, very important film to me because of what an actory film it is as well. You know, there are so many incredible monologues in this movie, and it is so like, it's such a ripe film. So it had a very significant impact on me, age 17, so much so that it's still probably, I mean, it's still in my top 4 on Letterboxd to this day.
Wow.
Mary.
So I think I was at uni the first time I saw this. I remember sitting in Glasgow University Film Television Department has its own like movie theatre, and every Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on what class you were in, after classes, say 4:30, 5, the film would start that you would talk about for the rest of the week. And I'm almost certain this is where I saw this for the first time, because I remember a bit like Emily feeling like it's a very actory film. Like it feels like everybody gets a shot, as it were, at having their moment. And actually, I remember at the time being completely blown away by, and I can't believe I'm saying this, by Tom Cruise. Because I never really think of him as like an actory actor. I think of him as like a blockbuster franchise type of guy. And I felt like in this film, it was the first time I'd seen a really sort of like honest and emotional performance from him. And as I've said several times in our pod, I really prefer him when he's playing a villain, like Collateral, that sort of thing. And so in this, you know, he's sort of red pilling before incels and pickup artists ever existed. And I just remember being completely blown away by his performance, how awful he is at the start of the film, and then the obvious breakdown towards the end. So yeah, it was a very different type of film. I'd never seen anything quite like it before.
So much of his performance was improvised as well, which is even more mind-blowing, because you don't think of Tom Cruise as being somebody who is like coming up to set and improvising. You know, I guess like you think about him at the end of like Tropic Thunder or whatever, which we know now is like that was his idea, but I would never think of him as an actory actor either. He's a popcorn actor for me. I wouldn't, you know, there's notable exceptions, but I'm not a fan. But in this, I am definitely a fan.
Yeah, it's so different. It's so different. And it's just a different type of film, I think. I'd never really seen anything quite like it. So, and of course, at university, I was being subjected to all sorts, not all of it entirely savoury. So this felt like quite a normal, in inverted commas, film to have seen during the film and television course.
I did not see this film in cinemas, unlike most of the stuff that we've talked about previously, basically because my son was born in 1999, so I had no time really to do much of anything for about 2 years. So it would have probably been around about maybe 2002 to 2003 I would have seen this film, probably in VHS, maybe on DVD. I have a DVD copy of it, but I knew I bought that later. So I wanted to see it because I was a fan of both Hard Date and Boogie Nights. I'd seen both of those and I loved both of those films, especially Hard Date. I thought that was just a fantastic sort of noirish type film, and Philip Baker Hall played a very prominent role in that film, and I wanted to see what the director was going to do with this actor and other actors. And yes, I was intrigued, but obviously by the likes of Tom Cruise as well. I was kind of blown away with it at the time, and it was one of these films that it kind of stays with you because of that. I can understand why it's still in your top 4, Emily. I really can. I can get that. So I take it you both probably rewatched this for the pod just to kind of remind yourselves more than anything else. So this time, what kind of hit you emotionally, whatever, like filmmaking wise or whatever, compared to previous films? What was the sort of outstanding feeling this time?
I think the thing about Magnolia, and I've watched it many times. Like I probably watched it maybe 10 times throughout. You know, I'm not a massive rewatcher of films generally, but things that are really important to me, I will kind of revisit every couple of years or whatever. And one of the things that I kind of forget in between watches of this is all the different stages of grief and forgiving your parents. And you can watch it sort of at any age and find something within it that can hit you very personally. And it doesn't matter if you're 17 when you watch it, or if you're 25, or if you're, as I am right now, like in my 40s and caring for a dying parent. So it is, you know, the metaphor of this magnolia flower and the unfurling and all of the different petals and how they're interconnected is it's very poignant, and it can meet you like wherever you are. And I think that's the thing that's most powerful for me about it, is that it doesn't matter where you are in your life, there is something for you, because there are so many different stories within it.
Wow, that's really that's quite deep actually. That is really I think this time around when I watched it, I was struck by how emotional I felt with the character of Stanley, the young boy who's on the quiz show. I really was bawling my eyes out, like when he wets himself and he gets really upset, like, and he won't answer the questions and he totally dissociates, because the type of pressure that was on him from his parents was unbelievable. And at the end of the film, where he just stands at the side of his dad's bed and says, "Dad, you need to be nicer to me," I was like fully chest heaving, sobs, tears, snotters, the works. Like, I don't remember having that much of a reaction to this or that particular character before, but for some reason this time around, I think because you're kind of familiar with the adult performances in the film, I think watching this young actor just sort of break down emotionally over the course of 3 hours broke me down as a human as well. And just that notion of like, you need to be nicer to me, just, oh, I'm going to start crying just now. Actually, I'm going to stop talking, because otherwise, the more I think about it, I'll just get upset.
He's the only character that doesn't have an option really to kind of change or move on, because he's the only child. So, you know, he is trapped in a way that all of the other characters are, you know, very much like traditional tragedy, and their own personal kind of failings are stopping them from moving forward. Whereas with him, he's a child and he doesn't have the choice. And I think that is so emotional and so heartbreaking. And I think especially, you know, when you're watching it as an older person, he should be protected, and he's not being protected, you know, and that is so hard to watch.
Yeah, that's what I felt. I felt very protective over him as a character. Like, the rest of it's quite Shakespearean, and it's, as you said, like the tragedy element of it. But that in particular, I was just like, I just want to take him home and make sure that he's okay, because I really, really felt for that character. I don't know. I mean, it's not like I was a child genius who felt the pressures of like winning my family money, but for some reason that storyline in particular just really, really got to me this time.
But like Felicity Hoffman's character as well is so mean to him. And it's like, you could have solved this problem for this poor child. Like, I don't know. And they don't cut at the end. They could like, they leave him hanging for so long, and it's like, just go to a commercial, for God's sake. Like, he's 11.
Yeah, it's like they could go to commercials for like every other thing. And I get that TV production is obviously very structured, etc. But a child, a minor, has just told you they need to use the bathroom, and you've judged that the production value of the show is more important than that child's well-being. And that just really, I hate her character in this film. Like, and I don't remember her being that obnoxious before, but this time around I was just like, no, I actually hate you as a character. And that's a very strong reaction to something that doesn't exist. So
for me on this rewatch, it was kind of more the spiritual side that I hadn't really thought about before when I watched it. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but it was more to do with the spiritual and religious aspects of the film, which kind of come in and out of it, and there's some very obvious sort of references there, but there's other ones that are kind of subtle in the background, and I'm sure we'll actually talk about it in depth later on, but just to highlight it, that's probably what was up there for me. So do you feel the film has a certain hypnotic quality, or is it just quite kind of a nice intimate watch?
So I think that, like, I get so focused on the performances and the real, like, I think we talked to, like, in the notes, we talked about it potentially being slightly melodramatic, but it doesn't hit me like that at all. Like, it feels so real to me. And the performances are so truthful that that's what I'm watching when I watch this movie, is these like incredible performances that feel really, really deeply meaningful and true. And so, like, I watched it with my husband again at the weekend in prep for this, and he was like, oh, these shots are so, like, I feel a bit dizzy at the beginning of this film. It's so Scorsese. You can see, like, Paul Thomas Anderson must have been on loads of cocaine, like, and just like, I don't even notice that because I'm immediately locked into these characters. But it's there. I know it. I don't see it. I feel so deeply connected to everybody in this film, and I feel so hard for everybody in this film that's kind of where I come at it from. But yeah, it is dizzying. The first hour definitely is like racing almost from plot line to plot line, and the camera and the shots are very much like, fast. But yeah, I don't notice it because I love them all so much, you know.
I do think you feel really embedded in all of the stories, although, as you've said, Emily, like, it does kind of rush a little bit at the beginning to introduce you, because obviously there's a lot to pack into this film. but I think you feel so embedded in their lives, and you feel like you have a real sense of who these people are as people. Like, it's very believable, it's very credible, it's that kind of like whole like slice of life type filmmaking where it's like nothing necessarily big is happening in that moment. You're maybe observing a conversation, but it just all feels very authentic. I think for me this time around, what struck me as well is quite often the lack of daylight, which is quite disorientating as well, because there's a lot of scenes where, like, for example, like Frank is indoors at his conference center. There's a lot of people shot at nighttime in like blinding rain. There's what you call like bed sheets over over windows and stuff in scenes. And I think this time around I was quite aware that the use of natural daylight was at a minimum for a lot of the time in this film, and that in itself is quite disorientating because you've not really got a sense of when and where, whereas other films obviously is like, well, this is obviously daytime or this is obviously nighttime, whereas this is sort of taking you on a journey where it's like these stories are so like such a part of society, and they could happen to anyone at any time, and therefore you don't need necessarily these markers to tell you when and where these are happening. Just know that these stories are sort of universal. And I guess I was kind of struck by that this time around watching it as well.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from with regards to the first hour of it. It is kind of full on. For a film that's so long, they do try to introduce things very, very quickly. And I think that's to kind of keep you on your toes and keep you engaged as well, because you're not settling into one particular storyline because it just flips and flips and flips. And something like, I think there's 9 distinct storylines in this film, so there's a lot to get in and a lot of character development to get through, especially like you say, Emily, in that first hour. It's totally full on. So let's have a wee chat about the characters themselves. So we've already mentioned Mr. Cruz and his performance as Frank T.J. Mackey. How do you think this performance lands today with a sort of 2026 slant to it? Is it a bit of a tragic character, or is it quite satirical, or is it just kind of foreshadowing for everything that's happened in the last 25 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels more prescient than it did at the time. It's sort of frightening, actually, like how resonant it remains. And maybe there is an element of satire in it, but I just feel... I feel so deeply sorry for him. I also really dislike him. Like, you think about his interaction with the reporter and how horrendous he is to the reporter. But, you know, he's had, you know, his Arrested Development in 14. He's never grown up, you know, and so of course he's like that, because he had this such a, you know, traumatic event happen that he's never recovered from, he's never moved on from. But yeah, just absolutely, like, I think anytime I talk about this movie in like cinema groups or whatever, where people maybe haven't seen it before, I'm like, okay, so Tom Cruise is in it, but he's good. All right. So like, just trust me with this, that you will like it. Okay. Even if you hate Tom Cruise, you will like this because it is so raw and it is so honest. But yeah, he's gross throughout most of it, and potentially it's satirical, but it feels hyper real in 2026. You know, if we think about like people's reaction to the film Obsession that has just come out in the last week, and you know, or like the Manosphere documentary that Louis Theroux just put out a couple months ago, it feels very relevant and very real.
Yes, oh, definitely.
It's mad how ahead of its time it is in that sense, because I'm trying to think, is it satirical? But I'm like, in 1999, who or what was he necessarily standing up at that moment? Because we didn't know that these people necessarily existed, like your pickup artists, your incels, your Andrew Tates, all that sort of thing. I'm sure they existed, but they maybe just weren't as platformed as they are now.
There was a reality TV show that was like about pickup artists that was on in the early 2000s. So I feel like it was potentially like a thing. But then, you know, like I say, like I was 17 when I watched this. So it's not something that I was like super aware of. I didn't know what negging was at that point, you know, like, but that became like a philosophy in the early 2000s. And definitely it was something that, I don't know if it was a big deal in the 90s, but not long after that, absolutely became a thing, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, what I love about this performance is whenever I go to see a Tom Cruise film, I'm aware that I am watching Tom Cruise. I feel like this is one of the rare times, and again, I always come back to Collateral as a great example of this as well, where he actually loses himself in a character. And I think that, you know, he is clearly committed to the performance in terms of the odiousness of the character as we meet him in that like conference room, and he's obviously being just hugely misogynistic and disgusting and all the rest of it. But the unraveling that happens to his character as well when we start to see the sort of mask slip and, you know, he's lied about his past and the eyes become really cold and hard and his jaw clenches and he starts to interrupt and he starts to lose control of a situation. Like that to me is the most fascinating part of this character, because he presents himself as, you know, the perfect man in the sense that, you know, he can pick up women whenever he wants. He treats them like shit. He makes loads of money from these idiots that pay to go to his talks or whatever, but the unraveling is so ferocious and so incredible. And I just think that this is one of the rare performances where he's not being Tom Cruise, all-American guy, box office hero. He has properly lost himself in this character, and I think it's a brilliant performance, probably his best, if I'm being honest.
The like balance between him and when he meets Philip Seymour Hoffman as well are just like this very you know, not as, I was going to say proper actor. I don't mean, I'm sorry.
No, but I know what, no, I know what you mean.
But yeah, just this meeting of this really like softened, gentle character who spends his life caring for people versus this person who has been so uncaring in the shell that he's protected himself in since he was 14. Just the meeting of those two characters is like, I feel like goosebumpy thinking about it now, just like that when they're in the doorway, just like trying to ascertain whether or not Tom Cruise is going to come in and see his dad. And yeah, you know, there are so many moments within Tom Cruise's performance that are like, it's breathtaking. It's, you know, he did a wonderful job in this film, I think.
Apparently he approached Paul Thomas Anderson after he saw Boogie Nights and he wanted to work with Paul Thomas Anderson, and this was during his work on Eyes Wide Shut, where he was obviously held up for a year by the film process. It took far too long basically for what the actual output of it was, but Paul Thomas Anderson then returned to him with this role, and he was very, very reluctant to take it on because it was so outside of his wheelhouse. And I think he was probably looking at the role when he was looking at the script and saying, where's the bit that I'm going to run? I don't run in this film. This isn't. It's a Tom Cruise film and I need to run. So I think it was a real challenge for him. And if you look at his sort of filmography around about the time, he was trying to take on some of these roles and try and shed some of that Tom Cruise-ness about him. He was doing slightly different things. Now, he has obviously gone back to being superstar Mr. Cruise, and films all revolve around him. But this is very much an ensemble piece, and it was promoted as an ensemble piece, much to the chagrin of the studio, because they wanted to have Tom Cruise front and centre in all of the publicity. It was going to be a Tom Cruise film. Now, if you look at the box art for the film, yes, he is on there, but he's not at the centre. At the centre is the Philip Seymour Hoffman character. It's not him.
Aww.
So it is regarded as, if anyone's going to watch this film thinking it's going to be a Tom Cruise film, they're going to be sorely disappointed, because he's not on screen enough. He's on screen enough for the film, but maybe not for the fans of the film, I would say. So the polar opposite to Mr. Cruise, John C. Reilly in this film as Jim, the policeman. How do you think that he becomes sort of grounding presence in the film?
He's dealt with his demons, right? Like, that's in terms of his character arc. Like, he's had a divorce and he's been single and he is lonely, but he is doing something about it. And I think that he's a really gentle character, and he's grounding because he's gentle and he's kind, and he wants to do better and to be better and to move forward. And I think that the vast majority of the characters are stuck, and he is not stuck. He has made decisions and and has propelled himself, and maybe awkwardly or maybe in cringingly at certain points, but he's still trying. He's dealt with his stuff.
He's such an earnest character, and I just, he's got a beautiful hangdog face, and we always talk about character actors, and there's no good faces anymore because everyone's full of Botox, and I love his face because it's so expressive and he captures that earnestness really perfectly. Like when we're first introduced to him, obviously it's a little bit of not comedy necessarily, but he's obviously like handcuffed Marcy to her furniture and then finds a body in her closet and she's like, that ain't mine, and it's like a little bit kind of like silly and over the top. But as we get to know him, as Emily said, like we realize he's already been through it and now he's trying to sort of do things properly, and you can see that in the way he approaches his job as well. Like he's trying to do things by the book. And I feel like there was a lot of tears when I watched this film again, but when he obviously loses his gun and he's in the rain and he's like slipping and he's literally crying and begging to God to help him find it because he wants to do things properly. Like again, I was, somebody was cutting onions in my house because I was a wee bit, misty-eyed. I just think he's such in a film full of characters where, let's be honest, a lot of them are arseholes. Like he recognizes that he's had some flaws and that he's done some wrong things, whatever, and as Emily said, he's worked on himself, and I think that takes a lot, especially in a film that's like is kind of fueled by ego and toxicity and like cycles of abuse and all the rest of it. He's recognized that cycle and sort of taken himself out of it, and I think that's what's so admirable about him as well, because you as a viewer watching it, you're like, well, maybe I could take myself out of that as well, like whatever feeling you're stuck in that particular moment. But I think, yeah, he's probably, him and Philip Seymour Hoffman, I guess, I suppose you could probably call it the sort of everyman characters, I guess, in this type of film.
In comparison, they're sort of like, they're good men. I think, the one of the overarching kind of themes is kind of like the sins of the father or whatever within this film. So there's a lot of men who've made some very questionable choices, but those two haven't. They are kind and they are good and they are trying. And so got a real soft spot for both those boys.
It's interesting how with the Officer Jim character, the first time you really see him, he's actually speaking as if he's on television. He's being interviewed and he's talking about being a good police officer. And it's like the opposite of the TJ Mackey introduction, where he has just been completely misogynistic. He's a horrible guy, whereas this guy sounds as if he is a normal guy. He's quite grounded. He knows what he's doing. He realizes that he's doing this job for a reason, because it helps people. It's not just all about the ego of being able to carry a gun and swagger about in a uniform or anything. He's actually there for a reason. And you kind of get an idea that may be a contributing factor to why he isn't married anymore, because he's a bit soft in that way. He knows what he's about, but people can take advantage of him for that reason. And he kind of knows that as well. I think he knows he's kind of in there as well. So Jim meets Claudia after he deals with Marcy's business with the body in the closet.
Yeah.
So what did you think about that scene between the two of them when they are introduced? There's obviously a very big sort of spark between the two of them as soon as they actually lay eyes on each other. And it's a wee bit awkward. So do you think it's like really, really awkward and quite cringy, or does it sort of just emphasize the sort of vulnerability of both of the people?
I think it's just so hard because she's taken so much coke. Like, just so much coke, like throughout that entire movie. And it's, how do you behave like a normal person when you literally just every 3 minutes have to go and do a line? Yeah, they're both innocents in a certain way. Like they're both, all of the younger generation of actors in this film, so like Tom Cruise or whatever, they're children, right? And Claudia is a child, and it feels like Jim is a child as well to a certain extent, as opposed to like Earl on his deathbed, who was one of the adults, and the I can never remember anyone's names, but the fathers of the film, and that's kind of, people are split into two camps. So they're both innocents, and then in the meeting of one another, they can see something of that, I think, within each other, that and there is like a purity and a childishness to their their interactions with one another, that is heartwarming. And even before you know what's happened to Claudia, you can see her vulnerability and you want something good to happen to her. And Jim could be something good.
Yeah.
I completely agree, because the guy that she says is not her boyfriend or whatever, but is clearly sleeping at her house, he just seems like I don't know, like you just get bad vibes off of him. Like he just seems like abusive and like really like just a not nice person. It seems like he's sort of like leeching off her or whatever. And so the minute Jim comes into her life, you're just like, this guy would be so much better for you. Like just immediately you just kind of want them to sort of get together. And as Emily says, there is like a purity in that, and it's like two sort of maybe damaged souls or whatever recognizing that in each other and recognizing that in themselves. And I do think that their storyline is so heartwarming. That's happy tears portion of this film, as opposed to the sobbing my eyes out, need a therapy session portion of the film.
I'm so sorry I did this to you. I made you rewatch it.
It's so cathartic though, because like sometimes you do just need a good cry, right? And this is one of those films where you just let it all go, and afterwards you're just like, I feel so much better now.
I redid my review for Letterboxd when I rewatched it at the weekend, and what I said was, every time I watch this, it heals me more. Like there is like the catharsis within it does have like this healing property to it, and I'm gonna move forward and I am gonna be okay. It's like kind of there's like this undercurrent within it for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Free therapy for you as well, John?
Oh yeah, or definitely, yes. There's always hope out there. That's what this kind of it speaks to. It's interesting that apparently Claudia was the first character that was actually developed, and everything else kind of branched off from that character in the writing. Obviously not in the way that it's all, they are all joined up. It is slightly different to that. And I found that quite interesting, that you kind of, he started with that character and ended the film with that character as well. It's like a very good arc that this character has, because at the start she's completely messed up and she's not screaming for attention. It's like she is lost, just completely lost. She's obviously sleeps with guys who buy her coke, and that's all. It's, you know, it's just one day to the next, just trying to get through things, and she's just completely broken. And she notices immediately when she meets Jim that there's a chance for something else there, but she doesn't want to pursue it, because is it going to just be another false start? Is it just going to be something else? It's just going to throw deeper into her malaise or whatever, you know. She's spiraling.
She doesn't think that she deserves it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. At first, when you're introduced to this character, Claudia, you don't particularly like her. You know there's something going on, but then she's absolutely horrible to her dad, and you only understand, obviously you understand there's some sort of problem between the two of them, but it's only developed later, and from that you actually have a greater understanding of the character and you root for her more. I would say I kind of rooted for her more than any other character within the film because of that. I just thought it was phenomenal, and it's a phenomenal performance as well. It's all in the eyes with her, as far as I'm concerned, because it's just this sort of longing as well. So there are a number of other characters here. We could probably do a whole episode of just characters from Magnolia discussed, but I don't think we're going to be able to. We don't really have the time to do that. So the other performances, what was the sort of standout one or two from the other sort of mainline performances in this film?
Julianne Moore is like just incredible in this. I love her in this so much, even though she's selfish and she's ridiculous. Like I think I probably actually know her monologue in The Chemist, like off the top of my head. It is so good, and she is so God. She's in so much pain, and I just wanna look after her, even though she's made terrible choices. I feel for her so hard, you know. But I feel like, you know, all of the women in this I feel for as well, like Claudia's mum. You know, there isn't a scene in this where my heart isn't breaking for somebody. So it's very hard to pick.
Yeah, I mean, obviously at the top of this pod, I mentioned the character of Stanley, who just broke my heart into 1,000 pieces, stamped all over it, and didn't even attempt to put it back together again. But I think the other character that I really sort of enjoy, if you want to call it that, in a film that you probably can't really enjoy the characters as such, is obviously Philip Seymour Hoffman. Like, we've spoken about his sort of gentleness, and I think that's because I believe that in real life Philip Seymour Hoffman was like that, just a very gentle person. I think the sort of care and the love and the attention that he gives to someone who you realize maybe doesn't quite deserve it is a very noble thing to do. I mean, for him, it's his job, it's what he does. But I think that to see the tenderness with which he attends his duties, I think is really heartwarming and impressive. And then when we have the kind of like introduction to Tom Cruise's character at the door, and red flag immediately, he's like, get the dogs away from me, and you're like, you're not a nice person, you don't want the dogs around you. But then Philip Seymour Hoffman's like surrounded by these dogs, and he's obviously been caring for them, and he is such a calming presence in amongst the chaos of that house, right? Because obviously we've got death, we've got Julianne, we're going off the deep end, we've got Tom Cruise contemplating whether or not he reconciles with his father, and here he is just sort of keeping everything going at the heart of this. And I think in a film that could tip into hyperbole and melodrama and all the rest of it, because you've got characters like him, it doesn't, because he's just there sort of keeping everything running smoothly. And there's a lot to be said for people like that, because I think people who organise and care and do all the thinking don't often get the credit that they should, because everybody else just sees the finished product, but it's actually all the time and emotional energy that goes into that I think is really impressive.
I love him so much in this. Like, I think that was the first big role that I ever saw him in, and absolutely immediately fell in love with him. I remember being 17 and thinking, I wish that I could get a boyfriend like that. That is what I want, that in my life, that energy. And having like gone on throughout my life to train as a nurse, watching him in like his character as a nurse, and him like pretending to help light the cigarette that's not actually lit, and just some of those like really deep, like, they're tiny things, but they're the type of connections that you build with patients who are maybe sometimes really difficult to deal with, but sometimes you just click with somebody when you're caring for them. And he's shown this so perfectly. It's such a beautiful performance, you know? Yeah, I could give a glowing review to literally everybody in this movie though. So
exactly. So what do you think Magnolia says about coincidence, fate, and interconnectedness of strangers and family and just everything? What do you think it says about all that?
I think it's probably a broader message about all of us being connected to one another, and maybe being kinder to one another, which is a beautiful kind of hopeful thing to put into the world. And, you know, there's all of the kind of the lore that goes with this movie about, you know, I've written it down somewhere and I cannot find it now, but the 1930s kind of text that some of the original kind of coincidental stories at the very beginning of the film come from, is just about strange things happen every day, you know, and we can't always explain everything, but it did happen, you know, like that, on that painting in Claudia's apartment. And I think it's about, you know, it's about the interconnectedness of everybody, but also just that life will continue to surprise you as well, you know. Surprising things happen every day.
I think there's this notion as well of, in some ways, some of the characters feel like they're perhaps not in control of their own fate. Like, I'm thinking of the William H. Macy character, and he has this sort of like tragic realization that his child prodigy years haven't converted to adult success, and he's really bitter about how unfair his life has been. And he certainly feels like life has happened to him, and this notion that he's not been in control of it. But then you have other characters, like we've said about the John C. Reilly character, who has taken life by the reins and has decided to sort of break these cycles and make his own fate. So I think there's this kind of notion of, you know, yes, strange things happen, but is that because of, you know, things that you've done, action that you've taken, action that you've not taken? And I think it's maybe about sometimes the decisions we make as well, and how they not only impact our own lives, but the lives of everybody around us. Obviously, we see this with the kind of parental abuse that happens within the film, but just this notion that you know, whether you believe in fate and coincidence or not, a lot of these characters certainly feel like they've been on the receiving end of a bad hand of cards, if you want to call it that way, from the universe.
Yeah, to me, it says a lot about that we have absolutely no control over anything, no matter how much we think we do. We're just travelers on this, and we're just going forward, and there's stuff in the back that influences what we do when we're going forward, but we've got no real control over anything at all. Donnie's a perfect example of that, because he was this child genius, and then he was struck by lightning and it made him stupid. So there was, and that's what he's saying, the universe sort of dealt him a bad hand because of that, but there was nothing he could do about that. It's just what was going to happen to him. So I do kind of like that idea of, you know, an electrical charge can completely rewire your brain, and that's you're just done for the rest of it. And you can see that throughout so many characters. The only characters that you don't really expect that of is the Philip Seymour Hoffman character and the character of Dixon, the young boy, because they've got no real backstory or anything here. Now, Dixon did have more of a backstory, but a lot of that was cut out of the film. There was elements of that were excised, probably to get it down to the 3-hour runtime more than anything else. But it's interesting that those two characters don't really have any backstory, and that's why a lot of people are drawn to them, because they are a little purer, a little easier. You don't need any backstory for the nurse. You just need to know that he's caring, and you can see that from his actions and everything, what he's doing. But the rest of them are just spiraling on, and they just don't have a clue, as far as I'm concerned. They're almost half expecting something bad to happen to them at any point.
That is literally how my brain is wired. Do not expect the good thing, always expect worst case scenarios. Maybe that's why this film really got to me this time, because I'm like, Jesus, I need to rewire my brain. Maybe I should go and stand outside and get struck by lightning. Maybe that would change my life completely.
It might frizz your hair a bit. I think I might do it.
Well, the humidity's doing that anyway, so it's fine.
So how does it portray forgiveness? Is it earned? Is it denied? Or is it just desperately sought and you never actually get to it?
I think that, you know, if we look at Claudia's storyline, she forgives herself, and that's wonderful. I think that, you know, it's variable depending on what character you're talking about. And there are some people that don't get forgiven, and thank goodness for that. Yeah, I think it's very variable in terms of like different storylines within it, but it's a hopeful thing. And I think that forgiveness is placed in the places that it's been earned, you know, where it's been worked through. I think, like, you know, the TV show host, he doesn't work through any of his stuff, and he doesn't get forgiven, and we don't even really get to see him die. We know he does, and everybody's glad, you know. But yeah, I think that the people that have earned it get it.
I was going to say, it feels quite meditative. I don't know if it's because I went to, obviously, like a Catholic school for my whole life, but I think that there's this notion that forgiveness is something you just should do, regardless of what's been done to you. And I feel like this film doesn't give you that. And that is the way forgiveness should work. If someone's done really terrible things to you and you don't want to forgive them or let them back into your life, whatever, that's okay. But as Emily touched upon there, the important thing is actually forgiving yourself, because I think that's what a lot of victims of trauma or abuse, whatever, are like unable to do, is actually forgive themselves for being a child at the time or for being vulnerable or whatever. And I think that this film really sort of plays with the notion of who deserves forgiveness, because even if you think about like the opening scene, which I forgot was Miriam Margolyes in it, in a very small role, she obviously shoots her son and she gets arrested and there's a whole big trauma and all the rest of it, and you just think, I wonder if she'll ever be able to forgive herself, because she's obviously killed her own son, and then you realise that the son has loaded the gun, etc., and they were always fighting and all that, and so it just comes down to this notion of toxicity all over again. But I think it's a film that really asks the question of, you know, are we entitled to forgiveness as humans? In some cases, no. And that is just the answer. Like, no is a full sentence in this case.
Yeah, there are some things that are completely unforgivable. You just can't get over. But yeah, you're both totally right in that it starts with forgiving yourself and trying to make yourself whole again. And if others then accept you and you are able to then sort of pay that forward to other people, then yeah. And it's interesting that it's the sort of father figures, they're looking for forgiveness, but they're not really asking for it in the right way. It's still in the same way of them being in some sort of control over the situation, and they're not.
Yeah.
Neither of them are.
Because it's forgiveness to absolve themselves because they know they're dying. It's not forgiveness because they're genuinely sorry for what they've done. And that's this notion of like, is that earned? Of course it's not.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, with the character of Earl, when he gives his big speech about all the things that happened in his life, and one of the things he most regrets is the fact that he didn't like being about sick people. So therefore, when his wife was ill and dying, then he couldn't bring himself to be with her. He just buried himself in work and just stayed away until that problem just was kind of put out. And that's one of the most horrible aspects of his character. And yet it's only then that he actually realizes that, how horrible he's been. It's like he's saying, he's looking for some sort of forgiveness in case there is some, space fairy in the sky that's going to come down and take you away and judge you. That's yeah.
This is such an interesting point as well within that kind of storyline, because, and I actually was talking on another podcast about it recently. So the female cancer patients are like warned that statistically about 80% of their husbands will leave them. And it's such a common phenomena because, heterosexual men obviously sometimes just can't cope with the caring responsibility. So this is something that oncology nurses are trained to counsel female cancer patients on, because it happens so frequently that it's a pattern that is we are aware of within medicine, basically. And the flip side is not the same. So if we reverse it, women stay, and in situations where things are that difficult, 80% of the time men don't. And again, these are stats, and I'm not pointing the finger at anyone specifically, but when we think about this is a diabolical thing to have done, it's also something that is happening every single day. It is very real and very true.
Yep. It's kind of echoed in the film I saw a wee while ago called Love and Other Drugs. It's Jake Gyllenhaal and Anne Hathaway, and she contracts Parkinson's. It's very sort of early stage Parkinson's, and they're at a conference or something, and he's standing talking to one of the other husbands, and they're saying, what sort of stage you're at, and he was saying it's quite early, and he says, just leave, just go, it's not going to get better, it's horrible, just leave, you'll feel shit about it, but go. And that's exactly what you were saying there about sort of the attitude of, there's none of this till death does us part, in sickness and in health. It's just, that's too hard to deal with. Just walk away from it. Yeah. And you get that these men are completely selfish. When you get the wee introductions from some of the characters, and you get the introductions of Jimmy Gator, and he's saying, he's been on television for 40 years and he's a family man. And when he's saying he's a family man, he's having sex with a cocktail waitress or something, and it's just, you can tell where his priorities lie. He's not this lovely father figure, which again we go into in quite a lot of detail later on. So yes, it really does kind of resonate, and you kind of see that time and again. And it's a very good point you're saying about people are trained to help people through this situation because it happens. So I didn't realize it was 80%, but knowing men and being one, that's not a surprise.
Not all men, right?
You're a good one, though. You're a good one, though.
Well,
we like
don't
you.
know. That's the thing. You don't know until you're in a situation how you're going to react. And it happens for every sort of emotional and trying sort of situation, how calm you're going to be, how you actually deal with situations. Now, I've been in a few minor things, and it's the way that you deal with it. You just kind of got on with it. Like when I went through the sort of the death of my father, which was 13 years ago, calmness personified the whole time, and I was really shocked myself because, and you get into a mode, but you don't know that's going to be the case beforehand. It's just what happens. So, but yeah, 80% of the time it's see you later. So, oh dear, that's not good.
That has really upset me.
I'm
because
sorry.
I feel like No, it just feels like there's this and I think that's why it's so interesting that Philip Seymour Hoffman is cast in this role, because there's this notion that women are the nurturers and the ones that stay behind and doing all the looking after, whereas Julianne Moore's obviously off having a complete fucking spiral in her car, having a breakdown, trying to get the Xannies, trying to get the will changed. And it's a male character that's there, and it's doing these acts of kindness and tenderness and care, because it's so rare to actually see that, because it's the women who are expected to sort of stay behind and do all of that stuff, if you want to call it that.
So 3-hour runtime in this film, does it feel justified? Did it feel justified in your first watch, and did it feel justified when you watched it again?
I did not, and never remember that it's 3 hours ever. It doesn't feel like 3 hours to me. We were watching it on Saturday night. We realized it was midnight and we still had an hour to go. And I was like, no, surely it's just 10 minutes left. And he's like, no, there's an hour left. And I have no capacity to understand time whilst watching this. Again, it's just like I'm so enraptured by everything that's happening to everybody. I really don't notice it. And I would hate to have anything cut. You know, do you think how could we make this shorter? You know, like who would you get rid of if you know, like everybody is so vital. I couldn't cope. Yes, the 3-hour runtime is fine, and it doesn't feel like it at all. It's fine.
I'd forgotten it was 3 hours as well. It was only because I looked at the back of the Blu-ray and it was like one time 185 minutes, and I'm going, that can't be right. That's 3 and a bit hours. And then I was like, oh no, it is. But I did read an interview with Paul Thomas Anderson, and he did say he would slice this back down even further now, and there's several narrative strands he would get rid of. He didn't say which ones, but he did say he would cut this even further, which is quite interesting. And I think that although obviously we were joking about if there's a 4-hour Odyssey film, my bladder's never going to survive, I think we're so out of the way of just giving our time and focus, most importantly, to a film that's quite wordy. It's got lots of different things going on, that I'm totally fine with the runtime. I feel like it's justified. There's a lot going on. There's lots of loose ends that need to be tied up. And it doesn't feel like a slog. It's not a film where you're clock watching all the time going like, is this coming to the end? Because this is getting boring now. Like there's so much going on, and you're so invested in the characters that, you know, another hour to go, you're like, yeah, that makes sense. There's still a lot to finish up here. So it's probably not a film that you would rewatch regularly because of that. But having said that, the rewatch that I had was obviously a beautiful emotional experience. So 3 hours was nothing.
Yep. Well, I'm going to watch it again before the weekend because I started watching it today. Again, I watched about 30 minutes of it, and it just went past so quickly because the first hour is just a sort of frenetic pace. The second hour is more to do with the studio setup and everything, and that seems to be the major part of it. And the film seems to sort of come to, I know what you mean about, we've only got 10 minutes left here, because it kind of comes to, it's almost as if it's heading for a climax, and then it kind of backs away from that, and then you get the sort of the final act, if you like, when some things come together, some things don't come together, and I just think it's masterful. I'm like yourself. I don't know how they could cut anything. Now, P.T. Anderson said that he originally set out to make a 90-minute film here, and it's obviously got out of control somewhat. So I don't know. Honestly, I don't know what he would cut in this, because it's probably because of the familiarity we have with the film as well, because there are no weak performances, there's no weak elements to it. So how would you excise something from it and still maintain the film the way that you kind of want to, you know, view it and everything? So Paul Thomas Anderson does some very nice things in terms of camera movement and creativity here. How do you think that works in terms of the film? Do you think it enhances it, or is it a bit too showy at times?
So, like I was saying earlier, it really, like, I'm so unaware of it because I'm so focused on the characters. It's one of the, like, it's something that I am aware of often when I'm watching a film, but I don't notice it. It's like, I feel like it's seamless in terms of how it fits in with the storytelling. Like I was saying, like, my husband was like, oh, the first hour is like, ooh, I feel like a bit giddy. And I was like, no, I'm just locked in. Like, and all of those characters are my babies, and I want them to be all right, you know? So it's really hard for me. Like, I was looking at the questions you guys sent through, and I was like, I'm not even sure I feel able to kind of break it down in terms of its nuts and bolts, because I love them all so much, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, it works. Whatever he's doing, it's working, because I don't notice it. you know?
Yeah.
I must admit, I'm partial to swirly tracking, walking through corridor shots, and there are them aplenty in this film. I really love that sort of style of motion where you're like getting glimpses of, you know, people talking or snippets of conversations, and you're sort of following a character like through their daily lives, and I really love that. I also really love the introduction to Frank on stage where he's like lit from below initially. It's just to obviously sort of emphasize like stature, and then you have halfway through his speech where we have this like genuinely stunning to look at silhouette where it's like the side of his face is just lit and everything else, and it's like, how many directors would just take a moment and like take a beat like that just to, you almost sort of lose sight of what he's saying, which obviously is awful what he's saying, but you're looking at that, like that framing and that composition and going, this is absolutely stunning to look at. And it's a wee bit kind of like what we were talking about on our last Collabs pod when we were talking about monsters. Like, rather than get caught up in all the drama, I feel like Gareth Edwards gives us a couple moments to pause and just look at everything. And I think that in amongst all of the franticness and chaos that's going on throughout this film, including the motion shots of walking down corridors, etc., we are given moments where we're allowed to just pause and sort of drink everything in. And even if it's just like, you know, the William H. Macy character sitting at the bar and the way they're lit and stuff like that, just the composition of the shot, I think, is just so beautiful. It frames the character in exactly their emotional state. And I think a lot of directors maybe would have rushed over those kind of personal details, whereas he doesn't. He just sort of embeds it into the film and into the characterization as well.
He uses a number of different techniques in the film in terms of the cinematography. Like I say, there is the tracking shot where it's Jimmy Gator and he's going into the studio and it follows him. That's very sort of Scorsese. He's kind of
I love those shots.
Goodfellas, you know.
Yeah.
But there was another one that's a complete contrast to it where Jim and Claudia are having their extended conversation at the start, and the camera is fixed in the kitchen, and they're coming in and out of the kitchen, and the camera just stays where it is. It's got the patience to say, well, the action is going to come back, and you don't need to follow them about. You don't need to have anything fancy. You just see them going about whatever their business is. Obviously, in Jim's case, is trying to get rid of a cup of coffee because it's absolutely disgusting. But it's very clever, and it's a very patient use of cinematography here, rather than trying to get right in the middle of stuff. He did that a couple of minutes before, so he doesn't need to do that again. He needs to do something different, and that really works in that sort of essence, I would say, more than anything else. So within the first hour, what do you make of the editing in the first hour more than anything else? Do you think it's quick cuts, getting everything up on screen as much as you can, or what? What do you think he's trying to achieve by his sort of editing style there?
Well, I think it's like, you know, he has so many people to introduce and he needs to do it quickly because we're going to run out of time. And that sort of feels like that's the forefront of kind of like, get everybody on screen, introduce everybody, because we've got a lot of story to tell. There was something that was sort of not really more related to the soundtrack or like the character development, but that I had wanted to say that's separate to this question, which is about the same song playing in the car every time William H. Macy's character is driving somewhere. He borrows his neighbor's car and he must take the tape and put it in the other car so he can like hype himself up on, and that's like really lovely in terms of like a narrative and also like soundtrack kind of device in terms of building a character, which is not at all the question that you've asked me, but I wanted to get that in there because I really love it.
That works, yeah. Yeah, it's the fact that it's such an uplifting type of song and it's full of hope and everything, and he's driving about in this crappy wee car while this is going on all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I think the editing within the first hour is doing obviously a lot of, as you said, John, like short, sharp cuts. There's a lot to pack in. You need to understand who these characters are very quickly in order for the rest of the film to make sense. And so there's a lot of sort of jumping around. And the soundtrack as well sort of contributes to that. Just to touch on what Emily was saying, I feel like it becomes slightly more frenetic during these moments. And then again, as the film sort of progresses as well, when we're in that sort of like middle hour, which is like the cozy hour, I would like to call it, it doesn't feel as intense. As we're getting towards the end again, it sort of ramps things up. But I think that there's obviously a lot of world setting, like even like the first, like the 3 stories that he tells us at the beginning, they cut really quickly to the next story. as well, and you just have the voiceover obviously explaining what's happening in this particular shot. And I remember the first time I watched it and I was like, what the hell has this got to do with the film? Like, because obviously you're kind of expecting, like, you know, straight away Tom Cruise or Julianne Moore on screen or whatever, but I think he enjoys that style of pacing, as we've seen, for example, in One Battle After Another, where I felt like I was going to get motion sickness from how mental that the camera film was at points. There's like elements of that in it. It's not quite to the same extreme, but he obviously enjoys that kind of kinetic type of camera work and editing choices.
Yeah, he's basically saying, you really need to keep up here. I'm not going to repeat things. It's going to be a scene, and then we're moving on to another one, then another one, and then we might come back to this character, but they're going to be they'll have progressed by that point. They'll be doing something else. So if you don't keep on top of what's happening here, you might get lost before the hour is actually out, and you will be kind of struggling to say, well, why is Donnie wanting braces? Why does he need to do that? That kind of idea, and you really have to keep on top of it.
I'm going to do that. See, the thing is though, like, and we've said this, and we said this last night on the pod, and we say this on the pod really often. I would so much rather a film like that than a Netflix algorithm that's repeating things to you every 5 minutes just in case you were on your phone when you missed that salient bit of information. Like a filmmaker that trusts their audience to keep up, even at breakneck speed, I am fully on board with.
Yeah, totally. There's nothing worse than a lingering shot on an inanimate object for just a couple of seconds too long, because you're knowing, well, somebody's going to pick that up and hit somebody over the head with it. So it's going to happen. And it's unfortunate that we live in an age like that. So, Emily, you mentioned at the top of the, I'm not going to call it a show because it sounds as if it's kind of professional. We call it a show. At the top of the pod.
It is a show.
Yeah.
It is.
We're talking about...
Believe in yourself, John.
Yeah. Have faith. Listen to some Gabrielle. It'll make you feel better.
Dreams can come true.
Yeah, but you can also crash cars while you're listening to it. So I'm not, it's a bit of yin and yang going on there. So
yeah.
So obviously the Amy Mann soundtrack is, as you said, is more than just a soundtrack. A lot of the lyrical content was utilized within the film. Some of the lines actually come from some of the music that she actually produced for this. And Paul Thomas Anderson said it's intrinsic to the story. He started off with a lot of the music and sort of worked from there. So can you overemphasize how important the music is to this film? I don't know if you can.
I think that like Amy Mann's lyrics have made this film, right? Like, I mean, that's effectively what you've just said in terms of like Paul Thomas Anderson's kind of like method when creating the storylines, but like even down to like the Greek chorus scene where everybody is singing, it's like all of those lyrics are essential and they're narrative devices. And without it, the film is not what it becomes. You know, it is it's central to the film and to the narrative. And Amy Mann's songs are like that though. She's like, there is like this undercurrent of real earnestness in her work and in his work, and some people, they don't like that, but I like a bit of earnestness. I don't really run on any other level. I am only like, that's all I can do, right? Actually, my husband was talking to me about like when we reviewed the film, and you think about potentially Fiona Apple's influence on the making of this film as well, and the type of earnest songwriter that she is, and the type of storytelling songwriter that she is. And you just think her and Amy Mann are very, very similar. And then he was dating Fiona Apple at the time. And it's just like, there is the earnestness in the music, the earnestness in the storytelling. And they all sort of, they come together to create this very perfect piece of art.
Yeah, I would just echo that. I mean, I think, as Emily said earlier on, I can't really think of any other film where the music is such a collaborative part of the creative process. Usually, you know, like that happens after everything's been, you know, written or cast or shot or whatever. So I think that this is such an unusual idea in that sense as to how embedded it is, not just because of the whole Wise Up montage, which again, there was onions being cut in my house during that, but it's such a part of like like a whole vibe of the time. Like there was always like a girl in school who dressed in black and listened to Tori Amos exclusively, like in the dark. Like it's that kind of I mean that's like that is the kind of vibe that it puts me to that place. Do you know what I mean? And it's just so powerful the way it's done. And I didn't realize that some of the lyrics had actually been incorporated into some of the dialogue, but of course that makes sense because, as I say, the two, like you can't have one without the other. You can't have the soundtrack without the film, and you can't have the film without the soundtrack. They're just so enmeshed.
The line that Claudia says to Jim, "Now that I've met you, would you object to never seeing each other again?" is the beginning of an Amy Mann song. Like that was the song first, and then it was written into the script. And I don't know if there are other examples of it throughout, but again, because I listened to that CD before I watched Magnolia, I knew all of the music. And then it was even more powerful, actually, to have already been familiar with what is the baseline of what's happening, you know?
Yeah.
So obviously Paul Thomas Anderson was 30 when he
I've achieved nothing.
wrote and directed this film. So what do you think about the fact that he had the cojones to basically stop this film dead in order to have a sing-along? What do you think? I mean, that's impressive stuff. And the emotional punch that you get from just that one scene, like you say, Mary, there may have been onions in your house. There wasn't any onions in mine. It was still the same outcome. And I know there's been a lot of column inches about it, but what's your own take on it?
I mean, I love it, right? Like, I think, you know, like I studied theater and I went to drama school. And so, yes, please, let's have the Greek chorus now. Absolutely. I'm ready for that to make a comeback in more movies, right? But I think, you know, it is a tragedy for almost all of the characters within it. You know, it is like the definition of a Greek tragedy for a lot of the characters. And so it makes logical sense that you would then have a Greek chorus. And it would be telling you very specifically about, you need to acknowledge what's happened and then you need to move on. And it is, you know, this is time to heal and move forward. And it's, I think it's an incredibly effective device. And yeah, I think I actually was in a play at like not long after I watched this for the first time, and I begged the director to put like a Greek chorus like scene into it. I was doing Jim Cartwright's Road, and it could have potentially like lent itself to it, but yeah, they were like, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah, this sort of sequence is just it gets me with the emotional, like the futility of so many of these situations and the weight of feeling lost. And I think that music, and like I talked about this film being a bit of a catharsis on rewatch, music is obviously a huge catharsis as well. I love listening to film scores or piano music or something like that if I feel like I need to cry or just get my head out of a particular space and into another one. So I think this notion that the characters are sort of using the piece of music as a little bit of catharsis as well, and sort of as a way of processing their own situations, I think makes complete sense. Like anyone who says that, you know, they've had a cry to a piece of music or a cry in the shower or whatever it is, just to sort of get it out of their system, it kind of feels like that sort of sense as well, and how that music can give a release when you're in a particularly bad place. Equally, obviously, music can have good memories attached to it as well, and it gives you like a nostalgic feeling and a happy feeling. But I think in this case, it's just like understanding the weight that they all are carrying, and that for some that's not going anywhere anytime soon. So it's like, yeah, it's just really powerful. It's a really, really powerful piece of cinema. And also at 30 years old, to have a 3-hour runtime film that's sort of like chaotic and there's a lot of, you know, narrative character development going on. Oh, and by the way, in the middle of it, we're all gonna burst into song. Like that is just, you've got to have a lot of respect for that, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely, totally. I loved it. I thought it was an absolutely fantastic. It played a lot like a music video for that sequence, because you got people in different areas, and it was like they were in the car and they were in the rain. Some people were just in a room, and it was very unexpected. When I watched it for the first time, it was completely unexpected, because you don't think that's going to happen at all. Now, Paul Thomas Anderson directed a music video for Amy Mann for Save Me, which I watched this afternoon just because I was like trying to find some things on YouTube to try and make myself sound a wee bit more impressive, and I can actually know what I'm talking about. And I don't know if you guys have seen it, but he did a video with Amy Mann for Save Me, which obviously is in the film, and all the main actors are in this video, and they're just sort of sitting really still, looking at the ground, and she's going through them all one by one. She's on the set of the TV show. She's in the room with Claudia, and all that, and she's in the back of the police car as well, and all this kind of stuff. And it's really, really good, and it fits in so perfectly with the film because it's shot in a similar way, and there's some nice touches as well with the camera sort of swirling round and all that as well, and it works really
I have
well.
never seen that. I am going to watch that right after this.
Yeah.
Right, so we've kind of talked about most things here, and I mentioned before, obviously, about the religious thing, and I know this isn't on the list of questions, but I have one that I would kind of like to ask both of you. Obviously, Philip Seymour Hoffman is Phil Parma in this. He is the nurse, and you have the young boy Dixon here as well. And that, like I mentioned before, neither of them have really any sort of backstory. Now, there is a theory that with the sort of religious allegories that are mentioned in this film, that Dixon is God and Phil is an angel. And I back this up by saying Phil is the one who administers death. You find that he's the one that actually puts the drops onto Earl's tongue. He's the one without any past. He's pure, if you like. He is, and obviously you talk about nurses being angels. They're actually sometimes called angels as well, aren't they? It's what they were actually called in some, like a sort of a nickname for nurses and things. So what do you think about that? Do you think that's got any merit at all?
Yeah, I mean, like the rain of frogs is yet another like biblical metaphor. So, I think that there is an undercurrent of that throughout, like with lots and lots of different like devices that are used. But yeah, I didn't know that about sort of like Dixon and Phil Palmer, but that totally tracks. That makes sense to me completely. And yeah, it is. I think I was not raised in any kind of religious environment, so I often don't have like the frame of reference to kind of talk with a lot of authority around religious stuff. But yeah, definitely there are undercurrents throughout it that seem very obvious.
Yeah. Now, Mary, obviously with Dixon as well, Dixon knows everything that's going to happen. He tells Jim, who actually carried out the crime in his own way by rapping to him and everything. And if you actually look at the lyrics of his rap, it actually basically explains the whole story, not just the crime that Jim is actually investigating. And I think it's meant to be Dixon's father that actually killed the guy. It's in the closet, but all that was kind of cut out, all that sort of backstory. And Dixon's the one that steals the gun or picks up the gun, which suddenly falls from the sky later on as well as the frogs. So what do you think?
Yeah, no, I didn't know that was a thing, but I buy into it completely. I think this notion as well, and it fits perfectly because young black boys or young black men in society are often ignored or overlooked, and there's the whole notion of out of the mouth of babes, etc., etc. So I feel like that completely tracks. It makes sense, and he's also a character that's kind of on the periphery, and he's not speaking in riddles. Obviously, he's rapping, but it's. His manner of delivery is something that Jim can't comprehend, and you imagine that sort of, if you do believe in major religious figures, that their way of speaking would be something that ordinary people would not quite comprehend because they had never heard a message delivered in such a way. So of course that makes complete sense. I did also, one of my notes says the rain in this film is biblical, and that wasn't like it intended to be like a pun or anything, but it is just a film where it is that kind of notion where you are sort of caught up in something so sweeping that you do sort of attach deeper meaning to it, whether that's spiritual or religious or whatever. You do attach that meaning to it anyway, because it just feels like so, I don't know, like universal and so sweeping as well. But as I say, I'd never heard that particular theory before, but I would completely back it. Like, that makes so much sense to this film.
Nice.
I feel like there's a complementary watch in something like Angels in America in terms of its sweepingness and the biblical kind of even the angel and like the way that the angel speaks within Angels in America. And I think that those two they're complementary to one another, and they would be good back-to-back watches. They're also both really long, so that that works.
Yeah, you need to put aside a whole day to do that, but it would be a good day.
Yeah.
So obviously this film has endured since its release in 1999. It's sitting at 8 out of 10 on IMDb. So there will be people out there who have not seen this film. So as a finisher for the podcast, how would you sell this film to someone who's never seen it? What would you emphasize?
So I actually did this at our horror movie group not many months ago to our friend Maxine, because she had never seen it. And I was like, so it's an actor's film. It is, if you love strong performances, if you like ensemble casts, if you like, being really enthralled, you will like this. And also Tom Cruise is amazing in it in a way that he isn't in any other film. But, I then just read out the cast list, and that is enough, I think, to sell it.
Yeah.
Like, it's got Julianne Moore in it. It's got, Philip Seymour Hoffman. It's got William H. Macy. This is like fully star-studded actor power film, and highly enjoyable.
Has adult life left you feeling dissatisfied? Then boy, if I get the film for you. Do you know what I think? There's a moment towards the end where William H. Macy breaks down and he says, "I do have love to give. I just don't know where to put it." And I think that's for some reason that line always sticks with me. I think that's such a resonant line. Like, maybe if you feel like you've had bad situations in life, or you carry guilt, or you don't love yourself as much as you should, or you're not even sure what love means to you and what it feels like to experience that. And I think that's, again, it just comes down to this notion of like universal experience. I think there's so many of us who are like, how the hell did I end up here at this age? Or why has that not worked out? Or, got themselves in sort of bad situations. And I just think that the sort of universality of the situations here that the characters all find themselves in, like, there's someone you will identify with, no matter how many times you watch the film, right? Because I've obviously seen this film a few times, and it happened to be this time around that it was Stanley who broke me in this particular case. But every time you watch it, you'll get something else out of it. And I think in a world full of IP and sequels and prequels and multiverse building and all the rest of it, I think it's really rare to have a film that's just so focused on human experience. And I think that if you like that type of thing, this is a great place to start.
Yeah, for me, it's if you want to watch a film that is overlaid with so many great performances, and it will stay with you and it will make you think about the film for quite a long time after. Now, I watched this film, it was about a week and a half ago, I think I watched it, and I didn't stop thinking about it ever since. And it was just it gets right into your brain and it does not move from there. And that's the sign of a quality movie as far as I'm concerned. And if you're quite content to get swept away in a 3-hour story and it doesn't feel like 3 hours, then this is a movie for you.
Yeah,
so
I would agree.
So we have done. Podcast over. Emily.
I didn't cry. King goes a couple of times.
I'll edit in some crying, don't worry.
Okay, that's fine.
So, Emily, where can our listener find more of your work online?
So you can follow me on Instagram at Emily Licks the Bowl. And I'm often found as well on Scottish Geek Guys podcast, doing spoiler specials, predominantly about horror movies, but sometimes we branch out a bit as well. Thank you, Mary, for setting that up for me, because it's been a happy accident that I've ended up there. I do also some like random stuff like cake crawls on the south side. So like a pub crawl, except we go to different bakeries and things like that, just as an offshoot of other random internet business that I do.
For ourselves, we can be found in all the normal social media channels. Just have a search for Moviescramble. We have a presence on most of them, and we do keep an eye on them, and we will reply if you send us something nice. If you send us something horrible, then I just forward it on to Mary and let her deal with it. She's far more emotionally stable than I am, and I really can't deal with that.
Wow, that's saying something.
If you like what you have heard today with regards to our collaboration podcasts, then and you think that you could possibly contribute as well, then please do get in touch with us. We are at podcast@moviescramble.co.uk. Again, we monitor that fairly regularly, so we will get back to you if you have an idea about a film that you would like to talk about, one that ignited your passion for the movies. But until we have other guests on, that is us for today. So it only remains to say cheerio.
Bye.